So the main motivation for the research was sitting there in 2008, 2009, talking to a colleague and saying, is this a freak event or is this something systematic? And if it is something systematic, can economic history help inform and speak to these events and give us some kind of understanding of what we're going through and why it's happening, and I guess in future maybe help us cope with it a little better. And what we realized was it was going to be very difficult to do that analysis just by pulling data off the shelf and saying, okay, let's just run with this. It actually required us to go into the archives, hire many research assistants, phone people around the world and translate various documents from various languages and gather new data. Why was that? Because we didn't have the evidentiary basis. So what we've done is we've reconstructed the history of banks, credit creation, a large part of the financial sector in most advanced economies from 1870 up to the present. So now we have that, and it includes the asset side of the balance sheet, loans, safe securities, reserves, but also the funding side, deposits, capital, interbank lending, and the total balance sheet size. With that, we could say, are there systematic relationships between this evolution of credit over the long run and what's going on in the rest of the macroeconomy and with asset prices? The three main findings of the research were as follows. First, we observe as a regular feature throughout history that whenever credit goes through a big boom, there's a much higher, a much elevated probability of financial crisis in the years ahead. That seems to be a systematic feature. When we saw that in 2008, 2009, we saw it in just, a handful of countries. Now we have that observation over a long period for hundreds of episodes, hundreds of financial crisis episodes, seem to be systematically correlated with those credit booms, which means that that's something a policymaker can take into consideration if they see those conditions developing. The second finding was that in addition to having a higher risk of crisis when credit was elevated, there also tended to be a much deeper recession that followed. So it's almost like a double whammy. More credit means not only a higher risk of being in a crisis, but also much higher socioeconomic costs in the subsequent period. And then the third major finding was that when these credit booms and crises emerged, if that happened to take place at a time when asset prices were elevated, when there'd been a boom in the stock market, say, or a boom in the housing market, that also tended to amplify the social costs of these downturns even more. And we found that over time, that was particularly true of mortgage booms associated with large booms in housing prices. That's much more a feature of what's been happening, say, since World War II than in the period in the 19th century. So to a large extent, and we've seen this as a gradual evolution over time, the world has become dominated by a particular form of lending, mortgage lending, and a particular type of crisis which is associated with booms in credit, largely driven by mortgage lending, and that can be even more serious and more damaging when house price booms emerge at the same time. So what we've seen in 2008 had all of those ingredients. We thought, oh, that's just, come from out of space, it's a black swan, we've never seen anything like that before. It turns out that is, if anything, a systematic feature of what's been going on for 20, 50, 150 years. And that's both good news, bad news. The pessimistic side is to say, oh no, it keeps on happening. Is there nothing we can do about it? Is this an irredeemable feature, an instability of our economic system? The more optimistic take is, well, we actually haven't known it for that long because we've only just got the data. And now we're more informed, and perhaps that can help policymakers as they go forward and design macroprudential policies.